Well, we're on the backside of the Players' Championship. It's the biggest event put on by the PGA Tour every year. And here to break down that event, he was on the grounds at Sawgrass, and some more about golf is our resident expert, Josh Carpenter. Josh, thanks for jumping on the pod.
Great to be with you as always, Austin and Molly.
Well, how was the experience down at TPC Sawgrass?
It's, a great event. This is my second year being on the ground at Sawgrass. It seems like every year they elevate that event a little bit. I've really enjoyed them moving it back to March from May within the last few years. The golf course looks great. It's generally a great test for the players. It's a true stadium course. And so the fan experience, the viewing is really great. They're trying to just take it to another level, right? And like you said, it's the biggest event that the tour puts on every year. And that really showed through last week, both in person for me. It's a great event to network at, to see other executives. It seems like, most everyone in the industry is there. And then it played out really well on television as well on NBC and Golf Channel.
Yeah, the numbers bore that out. The audience numbers for that Sunday, they were up on NBC. You had Rory holding on to the lead. And the numbers are actually even more impressive for the 3-hole playoff on Monday. How did those do?
With NBC's total audience delivery, on Golf Channel, adding in all the streaming and everything, is 1.5 million viewers, which, Austin, you can tell me better than anyone.
At 9 a.m.? That's awesome. That's an incredible number.
Pretty great number, for an hour on a Monday morning. It was St. Patrick's Day, so maybe less people were working. Actually ended up being the most watched sporting event of the day on cable television on Monday, beating out a Knicks Heat game on Monday night on ESPN. So, as much talk as there has been around golf and television, the ratings last year were very bad, down almost 20% kind of across the board. They've rebounded pretty nicely this year. And honestly, that 1.5 million kind of blew me out of the water in terms of what I expected. I was kind of going in, if they drew in the 600,000 to 700,000 range, that would be pretty good. So to see it hit 1.5 was really pretty stunning to me.
Yeah, I'm sure they love to see Rory keep playing like this. Obviously, he showed it, that he can be a ratings magnet when you get him in the right sorts of situations. It bodes well for golf as we head into the Masters next month.
Yeah, absolutely. Like Rory, one thing that the tour has needed is for its star players to play better. Their ratings in Q1 last year were not very good. And a lot of that was due to the fact that they had some lesser named winners, weather impacted events. So yes, you did have weather impact Sunday, but Rory's now won twice this year. I would say he's probably the face of the PGA Tour. His win at Pebble Beach, it was the most watched final round, excluding the majors, since last year's Players' Championship. So with him, winning twice now early this year, certainly bodes well for the tour. The CBS executives have to be licking their chops with him, coming to Augusta in 3 or 4 weeks' time with a chance to win the career Grand Slam. We talk about Rory every year, but this is the best. It's the first time ever he's won twice on tour before the month of April. With him having a chance to complete the career Grand Slam next month, CBS has to be really happy and really excited about what's in store.
Well, Josh, something Austin and I have been talking about a lot this entire season of TGL. Coming to the end of season 1, you got finals on Monday. What have you thought about this startup league?
Yeah, Molly, it's a word that's been bounced around a lot throughout TGL's first season. It's additive, right? I think it hasn't necessarily taken away from the PGA Tour has a stake in TGL, right? You've got some big players, Tiger, Rory, Mike McCarley founded this league. I would say TGL, it's been additive in that it hasn't really taken away from the PGA Tour product week to week, Thursday to Sunday. And as a pretty deep in the weeds golf viewer, it's been fun to watch. Is the competition always great? No. Are there moments where, it's not really doing it for me? Yes. Am I losing sleep if I miss a match? No, I'm not losing any sleep at all if I don't see a match. Last night, I was really locked into an O.J. Simpson documentary on Netflix that just came out, rather than watching the TGL semifinals, right? So if I'm at home and I've got a chance to watch it, usually I'm tuning in, and it can be fun. It's pretty quickly, it's fast-paced, right? Which I think is what they were shooting for. One thing I'd say on the, the pace of things, I would maybe try and cut it down to an hour and a half instead of 2 hours. Sometimes 2 hours seems a little bit long.
It does seem long. 2 hours seems a little long, and it's dragging out there by the end.
I was talking to someone at Sawgrass last week, and they said maybe they should cut it to like 12 holes instead of 15 holes. So, that being said, I think it is a startup league. You don't often see startup leagues or startup entities that are kind of in the spotlight that TGL has been in, on ESPN really from night one, right? In prime time. So they've done a nice job. They changed their hammer rules, which made the competition more interesting midway through the season. So they've been kind of building the plane as they've been flying it. And, but that's, being early on, it's allowed them to kind of adapt and make changes as needed. On the viewership front, coming in, they had been telling investors that they kind of expected between 500 to 600,000 viewers on average for the regular season. And Austin can back me up on the numbers, but I think that's about where they came in, right in kind of in the middle of that.
Yeah, regular season was right around there. And the important part is for, not just TGL, but for ESPN, it was above what it replaced. The college basketball combination of, men's and women's. You had some NHL games in those same windows last year, well above what ESPN was showing previously in those windows.
So one thing I think that they can do to improve their product, going forward, and they're probably restricted a little bit in kind of some of the windows that they can get in, some of the networks they can get in. A fair amount of their broadcasts were on ESPN2. A fair amount of their broadcasts were in the afternoon. I know they'll tell you that that's in an effort to give their international media partners some love, right? So they're not playing at 2 a.m. in the UK and things like that. I think those viewership numbers might go up a tad if you had a more consistent time, if you had a more consistent network, and a more consistent day. The days were by and large Monday and Tuesday, so that was pretty straightforward. But the time and network was a little bit confusing, but that's kind of what you get, right?
Consistency is important, though. Like, people want to know when it's coming. But you talked about the afternoon windows. Even that programming at 3 or 5 o'clock on the Deuce was up from what they had last year when you're talking about, like, some studio shows like a Pat McAfee show or 30 for 30 reruns. So even showing live golf in the afternoon was better than what ESPN or ESPN2 was having there.
Yeah, for sure. So your numbers might go up a little bit next year if you get a more consistent time slot. I will say, though, your numbers, flip side of that, might go down because some of the novelty around the league being a first-year league might go away.
Because the best numbers were at the beginning when Tiger first, played and Rory first played. That the only match that drew over 1 million was, the Tiger debut week 2 or 3.
It was week 2.
It was week 2, yeah.
Barely cleared 1 million viewers. And the numbers started coming down after that, but it stayed above 500,000. I am curious what they're going to be able to do creatively. It's something that Burke Magnus talked about when he was on the podcast, like things that they might try. Maybe they have some sort of celebrity invitationals that come down and use the facility, and they have those sort of telecasts weaved into the actual league. Maybe that's something that they try in year 2.
It's really easy to kind of thread the needle and think about those kinds of options. Some of the celebrities in other sports who are also, big golfers, right? Stephen Curry is an investor in a team. His former teammate, Andre Iguodala, is an investor in another team. You've seen kind of a revolving door of celebrities, star athletes. Josh Allen was at a match earlier this year, right? Who are at these matches throughout the year. And so it's really kind of fun to think about what they could do in that venue. And it's kind of wild to me for a golf person. TGL's been so top of mind for the last 8 to 10 weeks, I would say. And then it's just going to go away for 9 months. So, like, what do they use that venue for? How do they think of all the bachelor parties and, someone made a joke, the bar mitzvahs and things like that could be held inside that venue throughout the year, right?
I haven't pitched it to my son for his bar mitzvah venue yet. It's not going to be on his radar for June.
I mean, I was talking to someone yesterday who said their 3-year-old was super interested in it and liked watching it because of the colors and just the intricacies and the, how interesting the venue was, right? So I think there are a lot of options for TGL kind of through the next year.
Year 1 has to be considered a success, though, right? I think they got off the ground well, and people are expecting to come back still strong in year 2.
Yeah, I would say so from a ratings perspective. The technology is one point I would hit on in terms of what they really need to refine. Full swing is kind of the tracking technology they're using. Most people in the golf industry would say it's not one of the top tracking technologies in golf. Now, why are they using full swing? They're using full swing because Tiger, one of the league's co-founders, is an investor in full swing. So that's why they're using that. So from watching the matches, there were a lot of questions about, how accurately is the technology tracking these shots. That really needs to be refined ahead of next season. One reason being because there's a big betting component around TGL, right? And so you can't have people betting on shot to shot, hole by hole, and then you have a tracking technology that's not accurately tracking the shots. That doesn't provide good value to the betting companies, to the users. That's one area where they'll probably really key in on before next year.
As someone who is not a golf reporter or a tech reporter, what is some of the kind of better technology that's out there, and how can that change the broadcast?
Yeah, I mean, I don't think you'll see, Molly, you won't see them go to a TrackMan is probably the top tracking technology that you see week in, week out on the PGA Tour. All the players use it. It's on broadcast. Top Tracer as well. And I don't get super in the weeds on the trackers that the players are using every week on the range, but I know Full Swing, is probably fourth or fifth on the list. It's one of those things where you see Tiger Woods hit a wedge shot, and it airmails a green by 30 yards. These players are so good that they could try and hit a 185-yard shot, and if they hit it 182 yards, they know it as soon as it leaves the club face. They know that it's not going to be far enough. So the fact that, Tiger's airmailing a green with a wedge is one of the easier, clubs in the bag to hit. That kind of speaks to some of the issues they had with the technology. You would see players react right after shots. The camera zooms in on a player's face and he gives it kind of a curious look after a shot comes off the club, kind of as to, well, that should have been a cut or a draw, and instead it's going the other way, right?
All right, Josh, we'll get you out on this. You just reported on some news related to the USGA. That's the governing body that operates the U.S. Open, Women's U.S. Open, some other events. They are going to be taking their rights to market. They've been on NBC for a while. NBC had picked up that Fox package that Fox kind of let go of. What's the latest you've heard?
Yeah, I mean, basically, NBC had an exclusive negotiating window with the USGA, 90 days through the end of the year, and the sides did not come to an agreement at the end of that 90 days, and so now the USGA is just in market to either, they could re-sign with NBCU, or they could find a new partner. Like you said, Austin, NBC took over this deal from Fox in the fall of 2020 because of COVID. Basically, the U.S. Open, it was moved until September that year instead of June. And Fox, being heavy on pro and college football at that time, they wanted to move the U.S. Open to FS1, their cable network, and the USGA basically said that's not happening. And so Fox said, all right, we're out. U.S. Open, the USGA package never really found the right footing on Fox. I don't think they had it for 5 years. Just felt awkward. You had the Greg Norman experience in the booth, didn't work out in year one at Chambers Bay in 2015. And it just didn't really work out with Fox. So they sent it over to NBC. Basically, the way that played out, NBC got a honey of a deal to air these championships. It was only paying around $37 million a year to air these championships from 2020, when they took over that deal, through the end of the contract, which is the end of 2026. Meanwhile, Fox was covering the difference, basically, which was on average around $90 million. What you have here is the USGA was getting that top end dollar from Fox. The NBC hasn't been paying nearly as much. And so I think probably what happened is NBC probably came in somewhere in the middle. Most people expected the USGA to go to market with this, just because essentially when this deal was constructed and agreed upon was back in like 2013, right? So you're talking about 12, 13 years ago when this actually happened for the first time. How much has the sports broadcast landscape changed in that time, right? You've got the streamers that are getting involved between Netflix and Amazon. The golf landscape has changed significantly since then. So yeah, I don't think you'd really blame the USGA for going to market. Also, I'll add, the way Fox set up this negotiating window, it was about a year earlier than you would typically see that type of negotiating window. Ordinarily that window would be after kind of the penultimate championship. So it would typically be this coming fall after this US Open. So that window was a little bit earlier than you'd typically see. So again, not too surprising to see them going to market. I wouldn't mind them going back with NBC. As someone who grew up on, Johnny Miller and Dan Hicks, it's always felt right for the U.S. Open to be on NBC rather than Fox or any other network. Yeah, I don't think them going to market by any means means that they're not going to go back to NBC. It just gives them a fair amount of options to look at.
Yeah, I think there's definitely still a chance they end up back on NBC. And especially in play, and you reported this too, is the new SpinCo from NBC with Golf Channel is the only sports property that joined that new company that NBC is spinning out. So there's a chance the rights split up. It'll definitely be interesting to see.
Yeah, that's definitely in play with Spinco. And you mentioned the rights being split up. That hasn't happened in the past, but you look at the USGA's two most valuable championships. It's the US Open for sure, and then the US Women's Open, right? This package in the past and on the current deal has included some other events like the US Senior Open, the US Amateur, the Walker Cup, some smaller events that usually fit better maybe on a cable network like a Golf Channel than NBC proper. So it's been kind of speculated that maybe the USGA would split those championships up, the men's open, the women's open into one, and then the other events as a separate package. Don't know that will happen, but it wouldn't shock me if that does happen.
It feels like the same conversation we had around that NCAA package that went to ESPN. Like, do they split off the women's tournament because it had such value? But at the end, like, they kept it all together because it had such value. They wanted to keep them all together, even though the women's tournament was on its own.
That was such a steal for ESPN to do that. Such a steal there.
Yeah, even in year one, that is proven to be a really strong deal. Well, Josh, you also reported that CAA Evolution is going to be advising the USGA on that deal. I know you're going to be keeping an eye on it. Molly and I will as well. Josh Carpenter, our resident golf expert, he'll be out at Augusta for the Masters next month. Josh, thanks for coming on the pod.
Thanks for having me, guys. Always enjoy it.